Nous arrivons désormais chez vous à travers de nouvelles coordonnées et un signal haute définition pour une qualité de réception inédite. Et pour nous recevoir, pas besoin de bouger votre parabole. Faites juste entrer la fréquence 12541 et le symbole ré 12500 sur le satellite Amos pour recevoir un signal merveilleux de la télévision panafricaine, même en temps de pluie.
Afrique Média, le monde, c'est nous.
And today on the program, West Africa, we'll be talking about West Africa, where the French Council of Ministers adopted Wednesday the bill ratifying the end of the CFA franc. This text formally validates the transformation of the West African currency, which will change its name to ECO. It is a new step after the announcement made on December 21 by President Emmanuel Macron of France and Alassane Ouattara of Côte d'Ivoire. The reform comes that concerns 8 member countries of the West African Monetary Union, which has to do with Benin, Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. The adoption of the new currency had been in the pipeline for at least 3 years and was concluded after lengthy negotiations between France and countries concerned in the last half of 2019. Beside the change of the name of the currency, the real in-depth change is the breaking of the technical links between the countries concerned and the Treasury and the Bank of France. France will no longer co-manage the West African currency with the states concerned. Another change is that the Central Africa Bank of West African States will no longer have to deposit half of its foreign exchange reserve with the Bank of France. This obligation was perceived as a humiliating dependence on France by those countries or those who work for the reform. France will also leave the West African Economic Monetary Union decision-making and management bodies, but Paris will continue to offer guarantees in the event of a monetary crisis. It was taken even that it would take even longer for the former franc zone to join with other countries of ECOWAS to build a single currency. In the ECOWAS zone, some people, particularly Nigeria, do not look favorable on this reform. What a take? Let's have you on the program this day. And coming up on the program this day, Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina on Wednesday held a virtual meeting with the Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, over COVID organics. Rajoelina, who made this known via Twitter, said the United Nations Specialized Agency on Global Health expressed its support for the clinical observation of the tonic set to cure coronavirus. Tedros Ghebreyesus commended Madagascar's efforts in the fight against COVID-19 and congratulated them for the discovery of COVID organics. WHO will sign a confidential clause on its formulation and will support the clinical observation process in Africa. Let's have your say. Stay with us. This is Pan-African Debate. Hello, thanks for joining us this Saturday. It's your Pan-African Television, and we're glad you're joining us live on Pan-African Debate this day, and very much welcome. And today's edition of the program, we're looking very keenly on two very important aspects. This on the program, we're focusing on West Africa, where France over the week signed an agreement ratifying ending the use of the France CFA in 8 West African countries. How is that going to change the situation is what we shall be examining this day on Pan-African Debate. And equally coming up, Madagascar, this day our focus is COVID organic. WHO finally congratulates Madagascar on its discovery of COVID organic and says it's going to support the clinical process. What about that? It's coming after several pressures mounted. And equally, WHO was being slammed recently by the president of Madagascar, who said his drug was being neglected because it's coming from Africa. We shall be looking at that this day on the program, but don't forget that we shall be equally expecting to have your opinions in the course of the program. Stay with us. But before we come back to introduce our guest this day on the program, let's have this video. It's coming from Cameroon. We shall start with that. And of course, let's have this video.
Camerounais. Eh Dieu! Eh Dieu! Viens sauver les Camerounais. Les Camerounais vont tous mourir un jour en Tokoti.
Okay, let's have now the picture image from the technicians before we continue. Okay, now thank you very much to the technical department. Very well. And that's a projection which shows where coronavirus is rising and falling in the world. And of course, Cameroon is indicated there in a very red and of course a very long line in red, and shows a steady projection and of course a high rate of continuous infection rate in the country. Now let's come back in the studio. Thank you very much, our technicians. We very much appreciate that. And let's welcome our panelists here on the program. Let's begin with you, Dr. Ngwayam. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Oh, thanks, Luis. It's a pleasure to be here again, and the topics are very exciting.
Yeah.
Especially the echo. And off camera, we were talking about what we have to do to be up to speed, because there's a lot in it, and we'll try to examine it and see how we can brace up, so that we move ahead. We can from now say that what happened to us in Africa, French Africa, was not very good, and probably with this we should look forward to a brighter future, and then we should see what we should be doing. Otherwise, that change would have no meaning.
Okay, that's of course very important. Now, before I introduce the other panelists, Doctor, you just watched the video there from Cameroon. That it's one of the junctions in Cameroon, showing very crowdy as it is. And if you watch keenly that video, you realize that not up to 5% of those who were in that video were putting on the masks. And the projection equally from Cameroon shows that the rate of infection is steadily increasing. Yes. Now, what do you have to say about that? This is coming after President Biya said the wearing of masks is obligatory. Cameroonians are not respecting that.
That's right. This video is circulating. The video and that picture, they are circulating on social media, and that video comes from Ndokoti. Ndokoti is one of the biggest carrefour in French-speaking Africa. Yeah. And as you see there, it's very difficult to go through there. I mean, there are people just about everywhere, and if you look at the pictures very well, they're hardly wearing masks. Yeah. I think this was done only about 2 days ago or so, and you see, with this, you can understand that the disease is really going to spread. And then, if you look at the other picture too, that shows that graphic representation, how the disease is progressing, is progressing or what's the word, or reducing in other nations. But you see that Cameroon is accelerating very fast. So it's we have to ask the right questions. Are we doing the right thing? Is it something that we are doing that is not right? And before. when the disease just started and we asked people to wear masks and so on, it was not like this.
Yeah.
But as soon as the bars were opened, then people let go, and it was like it was an indication that it's not as bad as has been said. So let us just do it as we wish. See the people on the motorcycle. So it's very bad, and we really need to do something about it. Otherwise, before long, we'll be burying a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, let me get to you, Tessa, joining us this afternoon on the program. Welcome to you, Tessa Bax, journalist. Welcome to join us on the program.
Always my pleasure to be around, to know what is happening and give my little point of view about what is happening.
All right, let's equally begin with that video now. Since the coronavirus measures in Cameroon were eased by a presidential decree or by the minister, or prime minister rather, Cameroonians took it lightly that certainly coronavirus in Cameroon has reduced, or certainly it's not existing. But at the moment, we have more than 4,000 coronavirus cases in Cameroon. We'll look at that video. Now, what do you have to tell Cameroonians? Are we on the safe side?
What I'll say is that we have a terrible habit in Africa. We don't believe what we don't see. We have people infected, but we have not yet had cases where your neighbor dies in front of you, or you go to the hospital and you see corpses lying all over the place. Because right now, I'm afraid we are going through a situation where it started with Italy, it started with China, but we saw how it was really strong in Italy. Then it went progressively to Spain, went to France, and today we are seeing Brazil.
Yeah.
We are seeing part of Mexico and all those countries that are facing the peak. So I think that gradually it's going to get to Africa. And I fear that Cameroon is going to be the base of it, because today I don't understand the mentality. Maybe because the corpses are not shown all over the place. Maybe because people are not facing the realities of it. Maybe that's the big deal. But I think that infected people gradually are either going to be a cause of fear, or the situation is going to continue, because I think we have a problem is that the people don't believe in it. They don't want to accept what is happening until they see it. They believe, and when you see these images, you understand that it is in the low suburbs. It's not in the big quarters, because the disease is said to be affecting people with money, people who travel. So maybe for them, as they are seated there in their little corner, they believe that nothing is going to happen. But I fear that what we are seeing actually going on in Paraguay and other countries can easily get here if we are not careful. It's really frightful.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to Yaoundé, where we're talking with Mr. Fabrice Lena. You are the National Secretary, that's Communication Secretary of the Popular Action Party. Welcome to join us in the program, Mr. Fabrice Lena.
Thank you very much, Luis, for inviting me once more in this very noble program. I'm glad to be here to share with Cameroonians, to share with Africans our own side of the story. I think the video that you've just shown is an example to tell us that Cameroonians lack self-discipline, because that's simply lack of self-discipline. And if we look at how this world pandemic is affecting other countries, you discover that the responsibility is first of all at the individual level before the global level. But at the same time, I think our government is making the citizens to be in this position where they are, because they are giving very ambiguous information. They are not setting the example for the citizens to follow, and there is no follow-up of citizens to act rightly, because if we had well-structured health agencies or an organized management committee for this virus, I don't think we'll be at this level where we are, and this mindset of carefree attitude of Cameroonians will be prevailing as such. So I think the blame comes from the side of the citizens as lack of self-discipline. They don't, that attitude of self-discipline is not there, of trying to control oneself is not there, and at the same time, the government measures is not followed up. The government itself is not following up, because in our country it has always been corruption even in crisis, because many people walk around, they don't wear the mask even after recommendations of SDO and other local authorities. But when people are sent in the field to go and ensure that citizens do wear masks, do carry out social distancing, these people go to these places and take money from the citizens and allow them to do whatever thing they want to do. And you see, it becomes very, very difficult for us to be serious even in the management of this pandemic. It's a sad situation, and I really think at the personal level, Cameroonians need to adjust from the laxity attitude and be more serious and put self-boundaries. Meanwhile, we think that the irresponsible attitude of the government, not setting the example for the citizens to follow, should stop.
Mr. Fabrice, Lena from Yaoundé, and you'll be with us throughout the program. Now, let's get to our main two topics for the day. We're looking at West Africa, where France has adopted a bill ratifying the end of the CFA francs, and what we're asking this day is what will change. Now, Dr. Nick, now, you just heard on Wednesday France ratifying the bill to end the use of the franc CFA in 8 West African countries. Now, does this come like a good news?
Yes, it's welcomed news because you know, in 1950, was it in 59? Just before independence, there were those clauses that France got all her colonies or whatever to sign, and which were draconian, which were enslaving, which were impoverishing. And then, you know, if you look at African countries that were colonized, so to speak, by England, and then those that were by France, there's a difference in the level of development and behavior and many things that they do. And so you can rightly say that this colonial attitude has been very demeaning for French West African countries. And when we say that we are putting it aside, I can begin to see better days for French-speaking African countries. That's already a step in the right direction, but it's taken France a very long time to realize that they were doing a wrong thing. And you know, one might say that probably they are doing it out of good faith. It's not out of good faith, I think. It's just that, you know, times change. And I like this expression from Pidgin: if you know play politics, politics go play you. A lot of things are happening, and many Africans have gone to school and are beginning to ask the questions, and the temper is rising, and therefore there was a need for something to give, and they have done just the right thing to give. Besides the Africans, you see that the way France and Paris were presented to Africans, it was like, you know, if you're a black African and you don't go to France or Paris, it looks like you are a nobody. So there was this drive for people to show that they have arrived by going to France and going to Paris and then doing whatever and coming back. So that now caused a wave of Africans to flood, you know, France, flood Belgium and flood them, and they can no longer contain this influx, and therefore they are also looking for ways and means of stemming that and getting Africans to stay in their countries. So one way or the other, they were supposed to change something so that something can also begin to happen under our own skies for us to breathe some fresh air. There's no reason why I should want to go and stay in France, or my child should go and stay in France. Why don't we stay here? This is the best place that God gave us, and just because we are not managing it well, just because we are not doing things well, that's what is pushing people out. So this is a new era where we are going to learn how to do things differently, and then this is going to be the paradise. Actually, Cameroon will set a good example. This is going to be a paradise, and you see things coming back.
All right, thank you very much, Doc. Now, Tessa, this is 75 years later. Now, do you think West Africa is moving away from this colonial currency, from the franc CFA to the ECO? Do you see that as a major change, or this many have said it's kind of window dressing?
Well, for me, I'll have 2 points. The first one will be to know the goal from Africa that was stuck in the French bank. Is it going to come back? Because you have been giving details, I'm waiting, I've not heard that part, because there is part of African gold which has been stocked over there. So we are still waiting to know. Does it mean that when they will change to ECO, they are going to restore everything? You said we'll have independence from France on monetary issues, but where is that gold going to stand? Is it that they're going to keep it like they said that they will keep it for us? Is it what they are preparing?
Yeah.
Well, the other step is to understand how can they make a currency in reference to France, only to France? Because if we are open today, we will really watch out and see that Nigeria and Ghana, they have not yet said something about it. They're just watching. And if today it has been ratified by France, it's a good thing. But today, the only one who is standing forward is Alassane Ouattara.
That's right, yeah.
So what is the issue behind? I think that he should first have had a meeting with those big people of West Africa who are economically going to move the currency, like Nigeria and Ghana. But if suddenly we see a meeting with Macron and that the next day there is this ratification, I think that we are not moving very far. I instead have the impression that France is noticing that very soon the pioneer, the person that they have been working with, is going to leave power, and they are trying to use the person at the maximum to make their own, how can I say,
to push through their agenda.
Yes, to have their contract, because that's what they did before independence. They had to put their right people on the right place at the places they needed for them to sign the contracts, which were going to alienate Africa today with the France Afrique we all know. So I would like to really understand, where is our goal going to stand? Are they going to give it to the banks back in Africa? Is it going to come back in the shape of ECO? Because I also feel that the president, Alassane Ouattara, is somehow trying to hide the economic blur that is coming up. Because when you observe the economy in West Africa today, you understand that there's some sort of instability. Is it not a way of ratifying and distracting the people from the situation which is really coming up with this COVID-19? So we really need to have those answers to understand whether it is going to be a good one or not. Because when you make an evaluation of the ECO, it's still going to be stuck to euro. I think the percentage will not be better than what we are going through now. So why make a new currency and still have the same basis? So I think that there is a lot to understand around this issue, but there is no way I can see the hand of France getting away from Africa.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Now, let me get to you, Mr. Fabrice Lena. Now, when you heard that France finally ratified the agreement to end the use of the France CFA in West Africa, or 8 West African countries, did it come to you like, an appreciation? This is coming after 3 years of negotiations. Now, France finally, during this period of coronavirus pandemic, accepts to sign that agreement to end the use of the France CFA in 8 West African countries. How do you welcome this particular agreement?
Well, I always say beware with France, because anything that you do with France, you have to do it with a lot of caution. France had never been a good friend of Africa from the pre-colonial era, colonial era to post-colonial era. And France came up with the agenda of replacing the franc CFA of West African countries to ECO, because the regional bloc of West Africa had already come up with the agenda of making a common currency for West African countries called ECO. When this idea and news got to France, the president passed through his student, the president of Ivory Coast, to influence the other French African presidents in the West Africa to say France is now ready to replace the West African franc CFA to ECO. If France was very sincere to replace franc CFA with another currency that will give more financial autonomy to its French West African countries, it should not have limited itself to French West Africa. It should have been a total autonomy for all former French African countries in the African continent, using currencies that their reserves are in France and the currencies are printed in the South France city of Chamalier. That is to tell you that France is simply playing a smarter one in West Africa, a very smart one. And when you observe the situation keenly, you discover that the Anglo-Saxon countries of West Africa were very skeptical about this initiative of France, because Africans have learned their lesson from anything that comes from France. Countries like Nigeria, which is the economic giant of the West Africa, had been very hesitant to accept such initiative coming from France and from Alassane Ouattara. Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, because that's the only former French African country that the first president, Ahmed Sékou Touré, took the bull by the horns to be out of the franc CFA. And some other countries had been very skeptical, because the original plan of the West African Economic Community, ECOWAS, was to come up with a common currency that could enhance free flow of economic activities within their bloc. That was an initiative of ECOWAS as a regional bloc. And France realized that, hey, if these people succeed in this initiative, it's going to tamper with my interests in the French West African countries. So France decided to do something by accepting now the proposals that had been made 30 years ago to replace franc CFA with a different currency by using the same name that this regional bloc of the African countries had proposed, which is ECO. And when you look at the conditions that are given for this new ECO, which is, they said the countries had to have at least 10% of GDP inflation. They need to, their reserves will not be in francs again, as the former franc CFA reserve was in France, and France had to limit its ties in the management of economic affairs of those are propagandas. Those are propagandas because it has no concrete guarantee of implementation. And we had known France for la politique négative, la politique d'exploitation, the politics of manipulation and exploitation. So I will say that the percentage of change that is positive for this initiative is less than 5 on 100. So it's simply a change of name and maybe some few economic leverages, which perhaps we say, well, there is change, make some ceremonial arrangements, but the tie still remains, the economic exploitation still remains, the economic control still remains. When you look at the relationship between France and its African countries, the complete independence and economic autonomy of African countries is going to have serious economic effect and probably inflation or deflation in France. And so it will be very difficult for France to completely give up and grant that autonomy. Now, my message to West African countries is what? Is this. They had to initially establish their initial goal, their initial plan of bringing the West African ECOWAS ECO, which is not the initiative of France. But unfortunately, since most of the African head of states are stooges, France had already outsmarted them in that perspective. But if they were listening enough to the analysis of some key economic stakeholders in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Senegal, they will understand that they should not have let it go for France to take over. So it's a blunder that France had come in the forefront of an initiative that was originally African. And it's because she wants to maintain, sustain, and retain her continuous control of this sub-region. Why don't you ask the question, what about Central Africa, Francophone? Because they are making as if West Africa is because of the pressure there. We all know that West African economies are more liberal. West African economies are stronger than that of the Central Africa. And Central Africa is still one of the sub-regions that is in complete control and submission to France. And therefore, they don't have any plans for Central Africa. So if there is no question mark as to whether the initiative of France is sincere, then we should have said France should also accept the Central African sub-region to have a new currency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fabrice Lena. Now, Doctor, when you look at this initiative led by France and Alassane Ouattara, which comes to still the initial initiative of West African states to change the present currency to ECO. Now, France is coming with the help of Alassane Ouattara to push through with this other initiative of another name, ECO, which obviously is different from the initiative of the West African states. How do you look at this? Do you think France is helping to facilitate the achievement of a currency, or do you think France has a hidden agenda to continuously benefit from its African or its former colonies?
Thank you. I just want to step out a little bit and have a bird's eye view of what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
The West African countries, including Ghana and Nigeria, wanted to have the ECO.
Yeah.
And we all agree that if they had had it the way they wanted to, that would have been the best thing that could have happened to them. But another giant steps in and then does something that probably they're not very happy with. Like Lena was saying, he says that probably has only a 5% positivity. Now I would say it's not as low as that. Let's assume that if the ECO that they are having is the one that involved the original plan with Nigeria and Ghana, we would say that they would have had a 90% success, right? Mm-hmm. This other one that comes with just 14 countries without Ghana and Nigeria.
Now at the moment it's just 8.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. I would drop the gains to 60%. And Lena also asked a very important question: what is happening to the CFA in Central Africa? I would imagine that this is an experiment that is starting in West Africa, and then it would gradually creep over to us. But just like he says the people in West Africa are more dynamic and more aggressive than those of us in Central Africa. You know, and he's right on that score. But there's no way you're going to have the ECO over there and the CFA will continue to limp on this side. You know, the forces of nature would tip things over. Now, there is something, again, that you and I were discussing off camera that all African countries must understand. I think this is the basis of our death or of our success. And if you don't understand this, let me just leave it there and state it in another way. Let us suppose that the initial ECO that Nigeria was part of was agreed to by France, and they got it, all right?
Yeah.
And that they gave us the same echo here. Watch my lips, our economy will still not do well because there's an ingredient that is lacking in the soup. And that ingredient is more important than anything else you can talk about. Yes, having your currency is very, very important, but there is something that if we don't understand, we will still be slaves. It doesn't matter what happens. And this is it. In very simple words, it's called the DIY, do it yourself. And I got so pissed off when I went to the supermarkets here sometimes to shop, and I was talking to the ladies who's the floor manager, and I was asking her, why don't we have a lot of made in Cameroon stuff on the shelves? And then she was lamenting with me that they have tried very hard and they cannot go past 5%. The law in Cameroon actually says that, the law, I hope I'm quoting it right, that when you have a supermarket in Cameroon, the minimum of 10% of the goods on the shelf should be made in Cameroon. But she was telling me that they have a lot of difficulties even trying to get up to 5%. Which tells you that 95% of all the goods on the supermarket, I don't know how many supermarkets we have in the whole nation, are all imported. That's just how bad it is. That's the problem. That is the problem. Until you change that and make sure that 75% of the things on your shelves are made in Cameroon. When I'm saying Cameroon, replace it with any other country in Africa. If you cannot change that, call your currency anything. Do whatever you like with your currency. It still will not change the facts. And again, you remember we were talking off camera a moment ago. We were examining the black mindset. There is something wrong with us blacks, and we need to face it and correct it. It has nothing to do with Cameroon now, or just West Africa. Let's go to America, which is a liberal society. There is something wrong with the economics amongst the blacks in America. And it's the same thing that is bugging us here. If you go to America, to the black neighborhood, let's say you go to Washington, where blacks are crowded, you would think that the stores that are selling food would be owned by blacks. You would think that the dry cleaners shops are owned by blacks. You would think that the little businesses are owned by blacks. No, they are owned by Asians. That means they have all the blacks there, as many as they are. They all queue up and come to buy from the Asian shop. And it is said that when money, if you give $1,000 to a black, $1,000 to an Asian, and $1,000 to a Jew, the Jews, when the Jews take the money in their hands, it stays with them for 27 days before it goes out. With the Asian, it stays about 14 days, I can't remember. But with the blacks, it's just 6 hours, and it's gone. And therefore, there is something that we need to change in our mindset. We spend, but we don't know how to make money. We don't know how to create wealth. And we have to teach now in our schools how to generate wealth. That is the key. To tell you that when these guys came and colonized us, they gave us the wrong kind of education, and we have been celebrating the wrong things and having graduations over the wrong issues. We have to do what China did many years back. Up to about probably 40, 50 years back, China was not as good as they are now. And their leader did something. He went into their universities and all their programs. He said, bullshit, we don't want any of this. And he changed 70% of the courses and the programs or whatever in the universities. He changed them into polytechnics. That is polytechnics, so that the children learn technology, the children learn how to transform things and so on. And they went to the West and stole technology and brought there and encouraged companies from the West to come and invest there. And that's why China is booming today. Now, if you and I are going to be doing our own kind of economics, where we go, and this is one stupid thing that we do. You see, all we have a forest. We didn't plant it. God gave it to us. Then the government tries to regulate how it is managed. Then some of our brothers, we go to the ministry because we have brothers there. We are given a license to exploit the forest, and we are so dumb that we take the license and we sell it to an Asian or to a Frenchman, and then we sit and we are drinking. Then the Frenchman goes into and does whatever he wants, gives us pennies, and then carries the wood away unprocessed. So that is the illness. Until we are responsible enough, our disease is irresponsibility and ignorance. Until we cure ourselves of these two diseases and begin to bring discipline into what we do, we begin to bring common good into what we do, we begin to understand the world as beyond ourselves. We are so selfish, so corrupt, we think only of ourselves, and that is what is killing us. We need to change our educational system so that our own children can do it themselves. We need to go to China and study and copy what they are doing so that our children in Africa can become like those Chinese children. What I'm saying in essence is this: do whatever you want with the currency, argue from morning till evening, but if you don't change this little bit and begin to grow the rice that you eat, and begin to grow the fish that you eat, and begin to make the cloth that you wear, and begin to make your own tablets and injections, and build your own bridges, build your own railways yourself, build your own cars yourself, build your own cell phones yourself. If you don't do that, you are still a slave. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Nick. Tessa, after listening to Dr. now, many before now think that the reason why most West African countries or countries which are using the franc CFA are not developing is because of that currency, that the franc CFA has kept them in stagnation, has been the reason why the countries using the CFA are not developing. Now, do you think that something is going to change after this currency changes name to the ECO, just like Dr. Nick says, that leadership is part of the problem and not just the currency itself?
Well, I'll say that he spoke very well. It's very good what he said. But I think that before you start a journey, you need to make a step.
Yeah.
And it's very important to own your money, because we know that all the deals that you do goes through money. And to talk about a change, it is going to be a very drastic one, because I will give you from experience. I was around when I went to West Africa. When you stop in each country, you see your money changing shape. You have the impression that you have traveled abroad, but you're still in Africa.
Yeah.
You take your CFA from Central Africa, you get into West Africa, it decreases. You get into Nigeria, the same money you took from the western part of Africa changes shape. And when you see all that, you understand that we are not free, because everybody has his way of dictating the method. But can you imagine that I take my CFA from here, I get into West Africa, I can use it quietly, I get into other countries around, maybe if Naira becomes CFA as ECO, you imagine how you can easily do the circulation. We have to look at that. We have those, I cannot refuse what Dr. rightly said, but those are ancient thoughts for me. If we stick this to all the Africans up till now, there will be some sort of dullness, because it is automatic that we feel that we are inferior or that we have been doing things on the wrong side. But if you look clearly, you have quoted the example of China. Today, China has a currency. China is living in communism, and all what she's doing is under her own control. So imagine that it starts with currency in Africa, and that we should be able to decide when we want to, how can I say, change our currency, or I don't know. We have to be able to do that change without anybody interfering. That would be the first step. And to talk about the made in Africa, made locally, it is growing at a high speed. It is something that many don't know. If actually you go around the shops and all the like, you will notice that there are many young people investing in the project. But what is killing? It is the money. It is the way you have to open your company. It is the amount, if you want to send abroad, for example, because today we are selling out of our countries to the other side because they need our raw products. Now they cannot do it because of the currency. If you are not able to make exchange between your country and West Africa, how are you going to make the exchange with the others there? So a change in currency is a good one, but under the control of the Africans is the best, because if we still have to refer to euro to make our own change of currency, I think that there's a problem somewhere. But whatsoever the case, we are capable today to decide and our leaders. I would just like to say something simply. We cannot raise any, how can I say, attack towards those old leaders, because they have what they call the old method of colonialism, which is still in them. As long as we cannot start preparing right now, the leaders who are still going to come are still going to apply the same methods. We can do what we are talking about right back home. Do you, Africans seated there, consume most of the products from your own country? That's the big step. Because if you have the child in the house who is saying that daddy is coming with pepper, which is locally made, daddy is buying my clothes from this, or that is how you put the culture in the child. You don't wait that it should start from the president up there, because all those presidents are from the old school. So if you start complaining, I think that we will just be complaining, and when they will change the currency in our minds, it will mean that there's nothing changed, and we'll still be like, we are waiting for them to change our lives. If the currency is back into our hands, I think that we can make the control. And they know it. That's why they're stepping in. They know that when a country can control her currency, there's nothing you can do.
Okay. All right. Just like you were saying, there are certain governments which are already banning the importation of certain goods from abroad, like Kenya banned the importation of second-hand stuff into the country. Now, don't you think this is, or these are some of the measures, just like Nigeria at the moment banned the importation of rice in the country, that has boosted the production of rice produced in Nigeria now. Nigerians now consume rice which is being produced in Nigeria. Don't you think it's for the government to put in place such measures to limit the inflow of foreign goods in the country that will permit now the need for production to be done in the country?
Well, one thing I would say is that the youths have to take responsibility. I'm not talking about Africans, I'm talking about the youths. Because what is happening in our continent is that when a young person decides to do something, if he doesn't have a follow-up from the start, he's what they call discouraged.
Yeah.
You cannot be a government and sit there and watch all over the place. It's for the youths now with their projects to come towards the government and show that we can do this. Because actually, I'm noticing that there are many young people who had projects, but maybe they fell on the wrong people. And the other side is to talk to our elders, talk to our leaders who are maybe not from the government or whatsoever, that they should know how to encourage the youth. Because we have a problem right now in Africa. It's that when a youth comes with a project towards the African elder, the African elder can never really invest in the youth. I don't understand why. He will wait maybe when the youth gets in contact with a foreigner and gets all the praises. That's when our own brothers will come and try to invest in us. And that is where we have a big problem of mentality, as he was saying. We need to encourage ourselves and encourage the consumption of our goods. But if we have our own currency without those colonial masters around it, I think that there will be a great blow, because you will not need to make the exchange all the time. You will take your money, get into another country as if you're in your place, and you invest there with no fear. Because right now, when you look at going to another country, you fear somehow that at any moment there might be a change and you might be isolated or whatsoever. So it is really important that we work on those aspects and try to find a solution. But the currency needs to step in.
All right. Now, let me get to you, Mr. Fabrice, Lena, and Yaoundé. Now, what do you think? Many believe that it is better for Africa to have to adopt a single currency, and which will be controlled by the African Union. Do you think Africa will be in a better position if we have a single currency that is being controlled by the African Union? Will it save us from all this struggle that we are finding ourselves into? Let's have your say, Mr. Fabrice, Lena.
We need to understand that everything is progressive, and with the new Africa that we want to construct, to build, with the dynamic of the youth of the 21st century, it is attainable. But with the present trend, the present presidents that we are having in Africa, like those of the Central Africa sub-region, like that of Cameroon and other African countries, it will not be possible. Because when we look at the management of the African Union for now, it is just an organization that is submitted and subject to the world organizations which work for the superior powers or the mighty countries. Unless we petition and work for true Pan-African leaders who value African goods, who fight hard to curtail relationships with the mighty countries and encourage the African continent to go back to the socialism of former Tanzanian President Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, the socialism of the African man, producing and consuming our own goods. We cannot achieve that. It is absolutely right that if Africa succeeds to put in place a common currency that strips off trade barriers, makes transactions to become less costly, makes free flow of goods between African countries, it is going to make Africa the economic giant of the world, considering the fact that most of our resources are still unexploited, considering the fact that we have a large volume of human resource and manpower that could develop these inclining or developing industries which are still at the primary level. So when you look at the situation of West Africa, you understand something. The African continent is emerging, but with a perspective of culture and external influence differently. Let me break it down. In West Africa, we have two groups of countries. We have the West African Monetary Union, which is the French West African countries that are using the franc CFA, and the West African Monetary Zone, which is the West African English countries using their own currencies. And when you look at employment rates, economic activities, ability to consume local goods, free flow of goods, and so on and so forth, you come to the conclusion that the West African monetary zone made up of Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, is having a higher rate of autonomy, of control over their resource than the other bloc, which is completely submissive to France. When the West African Economic Community, ECOWAS, had their agreement to establish ECO, the other bloc, which is submissive to France, after discussing with France unilaterally, that means they did not consult the English bloc, decided to endorse the pro-French ECO, which is still peg the same amount to euro. And France is the one to guarantee the convertibility of this new currency. It becomes a serious problem for an economic giant like Nigeria to enter into that kind of scam of economic development for West Africa, because their currency as of now do not have such conditions and will not enter into conditions that is going to affect their country. But on the global view for West Africa, it's going to be advantageous for the French West African countries. Now, the French West African countries not helping issues. They are not helping issues because there is some sort of betrayal. Betrayal because they sold an initiative that was originally for their economic bloc to limit trade barriers, to bolster economic activities, reduce unemployment, which is ravaging more of the economy of these French West African countries than the English West African countries. When we look at economic stability in Burkina Faso, in Togo, in Ivory Coast, in Mali, in Niger, in Mauritania, you look at those countries, you discover that it is a sham. It is no different from the Central African state. We discover how the stability of Cameroon in Central Africa was not a good thing for France until they had to, by some disposition, look for means that we should also be into chaos, trouble, and then they come into the media and tell us how they are in total solidarity with us. It is a sham. They are glorifying the fact that we are in chaos. So, I am saying that these French West African countries have to reiterate, have to rethink, because they are dragging the other people who are moving to prosperity, who are at the takeoff stage of their economy, who are moving towards more economic autonomy, who are gradually emancipating Africa, who are the blockbusters of the African Union, who are struggling for us to discover the African identity and the Pan-African spirit, to be going back to the neo-colonial system. So there is that fight between the neo-colonial countries, which is the French West African countries, and the Pan-African countries, which is the West African English-speaking countries. The president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, said that if the echo of the WAMU is the French West African Monetary Union, that is for the Francophone West Africa French countries. If that union's initiative for an echo is for economic prosperity of their bloc and the African continent, then Ghana is able to endorse. And we discover that this is a country that had delivered a lot of Pan-Africans, the Nkrumahs, and so on. So there are countries that are really on daily basis organizing meetings, looking into it that Africa emancipate, while others are there struggling that we continue the everlasting exploitative ties with France, which is so bad. Other countries should not be working for us to go ahead, and others are working for us to go behind. That is the message. And I think that for African Union to realize its objective, look carefully, Mr. Luis and dear Africans, the different blocks in Africa. When you look at the ECOWAS, the SADC of South Africa group, Central African bloc, the Maghrebs, and the East African bloc, you discover that the West African bloc, the East African bloc, the South African bloc, and the North African bloc, progressively and respectively, as I've mentioned, are going faster. And the least of this bloc is the Central African bloc. Whereas, in terms of resources, in terms of human and the resources that these different zones possess, I think the Central Africa is one of the richest with human resource. Is if you look carefully, you discover that Cameroonians are very intelligent people, not by education, but I think it's a special grace of God, wisdom naturally given by God. But because we are attached to people who turn our intelligence to be used negatively, to think of exploiting fellow Africans, to think of gathering everything for ourselves, to think of putting the capitalism spirit of myself, of having all the properties alone, it becomes now very difficult for us to advance. And unless we understand that the communal spirit of the African man, which is sharing, which is limiting and putting Africa first, in everything we do, we cannot succeed. We cannot succeed. All organizations in the world are profiting and gaining behind Africa. But yet, Africa seems to be the most insulted continent in the world. That should not be the case. I think, Mr. Luis, it is possible for Africa to emancipate, to have a common currency, to grow beyond the situations that we are having now, to have a high employment rate. We should start now by putting down the governments that are hindering us to get to that level. We should start now by consolidating the Pan-African groups that will take us to that level. We should start now by replacing the true Pan-African leaders with the loyalists to the mighty countries that are putting us at the situation where we are today. That is, we have to start from there.
All right, thank you very much, Fabrice, Lena. Join us from Yaoundé. We'll stay in touch. Now, if the number's open for you to call and share with us your opinion, what do you think about the France-led eco currency, which was ratified over the week on Wednesday? What do you think about that? The currency, the value is still going to be pegged to the euro, and the convertibility is still going to be decided by France, although the money will not, or 50% again, will not be deposited in the French bank, and some of the advantages. Now, we have a call online. Welcome to the program. Good afternoon.
Hello.
You're on the line. Welcome to the program. You're live.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm calling from the USA, and I just want to add my contribution to your emission. So first of all, I want to say that in this 21st century, we cannot accept that a country can exist without their own currency. That should not happen. No matter what happens, no matter what they are struggling in, they should have their own currency. That's my first point. My second point is an answer to one of your guests. I don't know his name, the Mr. who wear glasses. He said having their own currency is not actually the first thing to do. People in Africa should get back to working, doing business, and other stuff. That's true, right? And he gave the example of the USA, when we can see Asian or Jews who are doing very good business out there. But let me tell you something. You know, before doing business, you have to have money, right? And this money, you cannot have it from your own pocket. That means you have to have loan, right? In this country, let's say in the United States, the interest rates of loans are so low. So these people can easily have their loan and do their own business. So when it comes back to Africa, those countries who are using CFA and etc., the interest rate in this country is so high. So these people cannot easily have loans to go do their business. Let's take the example of Nigeria. In Nigeria, the interest rate is somehow low. So the people in Nigeria, you can see that they are doing more business than the people in West African countries, right? So why the interest rate is so low in countries like Nigeria? Because they are creating much money, because the interest rate of money goes with the money creation. So back to West African country, they are not controlling their own money, so the interest rate in this country is very, very high. So young people cannot easily get a loan to go do their business. So why the interest rate is so high? Because they're using all of their foreign currency to protect their money. That's that's a part of the agreement they signed with France. if you want to keep your inflation rate under 2%, you have to support your money. So they are using all of what they have through the trade of the raw material, the natural resources. They are using all of this money to protect the CFA. So young people don't have easily access to loan to do their business. You know what I mean? So that's what the cause of what happened in this country. So now I can understand, no matter what these people are struggling in their country, I can understand that you can say these people, this country, they don't have priority to have their own money, to have their own currency, because they have to do something first. It doesn't make sense. Tell me one of a country in the world who succeeds in other currency without their own currency. It doesn't exist. If you take the example of Ghana, if you go back far to 1980 or 1970, Ghana was a very poor country. Ghana even was back to a country like Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, right? But literally, Ghanaian people, they are trying to build up the economy, and today Ghana overpassed Ivory Coast because they are using their own monetary policy to build up their country. So the first thing to do for the African country to get back to use their own money. The lady who is your guest gave a very good example. She said you cannot take a CFA in Central Africa to go back to West Africa easily. Convert it first into euro before using a CFA in West Africa. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. We are on 21st century, and this is unbelievable. Nobody can believe that. And no matter what this country do, France always try to hijack them. France always try to put hands on them. And France use kind of presidents of kind of leaders in Africa to keep holding this country in this matter. It doesn't make sense. So what I'm saying is this country has to do things by themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for your opinion from the USA. We very much appreciate it. We're still going to stay online before Dr. Ling, you come back to, before we leave you to react to that. Let's have this other caller from Bamenda, Mr. Lois. Welcome to join us on the program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Luis. Hello? Good afternoon.
Program.
What I want to say is that more African people speak for African continent is to have one unique currency, is to start to lay the foundation for a new African Union. Because you see, Mr. Luis, in the creation of African Union, this union is not for African people. This union is there like just a TV that remote control is in ground. It's the type of planet that comes to the TV. So, African member of African Bar Association, religious authority, African professional, African people of goodwill, on you then stand up a foundation, a new African Union. A new African Union that will stand for African people, that can put a constitution, economic constitution, political constitution, that can guarantee a free and fair election in African countries, that can guarantee a good economic system for African countries. From there, we can move forward. Because you see, France is using African Union to destroy Africa. African is not using by different persons. France is using African Union to destroy Africa because African Union is not for African people. Until African youth, African people stand up and lay a foundation, economic constitution, political constitution that can guarantee a good economic and good.
Much for your call from Bamenda. Maybe we get the last caller before we come back to the studio. One last call online. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. All right, now, Dr. Nick, you had to react to the first caller.
That's right. He was calling from the US, I suppose.
From the US, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I like what you were saying. You know, when we are talking on a platform or like on television like this, you know, I could say one thing and you understand it another way, but probably I will go over it just so that we are very clear on some issues. What you have said is really correct. And when we are talking about money, there are three positions: position A, B, and C. Currently, with the CFA, we are in the worst position. That's that position C, where we are slaves. And what would be the best position that anybody would wish to be at is position A, where you have your own currency. We are not arguing about the advantages of having your own currency or whatever. So that position A is the greatest place to be, and if you can have it, that is great. But now, when you're dealing with someone who is a little bit smart and then is hitting you under the belt and is pushing you into a position B, well, as of now, they're in the position B. I don't know whether when it comes to Central African states, we'll be smart enough to get to position A. But in that position B, I'm only saying, fine, you're in the position B. Look around again and see what else you can do to improve on your situation. And I was just pressing on to say that even if you're on position A and you don't do what I was saying, you will still not be liberated. You have to be, what's the best situation? Be in position A as far as money is concerned, that is, have your own money, and then go ahead and be as good as the South Koreans, the Malaysians, the Israelites in technology, in production, and whatever. But if you have the money and you are not producing anything, and you lack entrepreneurial skills, you lack technology, you lack leadership and managerial skills, if you lack all these things, you will still not make it. That's all I'm saying. So to be good, let me just, because many people are listening to us. To be good, have your own money. You have the governance of your own money and you decide what you do with it. And you don't have to ask anybody or take anybody's permission. That's the best position. Once you have your money in hand, do the other thing, which is solve your own problems yourself. Like when Lena was talking, Lena was saying, oh, we have a lot of human resources. No, he didn't do his research. What you are calling human resources is you are only counting the number of universities we have and the number of master's degrees and PhDs. That's not it. Those PhDs and no, that's not it. You are counting that one, you get it wrong. If you are just counting the demographics, you get it wrong. It's about people who have the capacity to make it happen. You see, the question is, how many people can grow rice industrially in Cameroon? That's the question. How many people can feed, do you have 10 people who can feed all of Cameroon? No. That's the capacity we are talking about. Yes, we have a lot of people, but capacity is lacking, and we need to work on that capacity. And we know that capacity is lacking because to do our roads, to do every little thing, we have to go and bring people from abroad. While we are sitting and drinking, they are doing the job for us. After that, they take the little money back with them. Number one, have your money. Number two, do the dirty work yourself.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Yes.
I don't think that when he was talking about having resources, it was looking at the demography, no. I think that what he was trying to quote out is that we have all the skills, we have all the intelligence.
No, we don't.
No, I will be clear with you. Today we have China like a reference. We even can talk about America, because America is what? It is a place where the British went and dumped the slaves. They were dumping the prisoners and dumping all those people they didn't want on their land. So they went and dumped those people and they made their own place, and it's today called America. Everybody would like to go to America. Let's be clear about it. When they got to America, what was there? When you get to Texas, what do you see there? You just see the land, everything was dry. What did they do? They took time and developed their technology. Today, we cannot stand and be afraid to make the jump, because what you are talking about is that we in Africa, we are afraid of what we are not seeing. But when we talk about the technology, I think that we have youth. Look at, for example, at the COVID-19, the incident today. What is happening? Are people flying to go and being cured out there? they're staying back in their countries. What is happening? We are developing technology. We are opening ourselves to the youths who are going to bring their contribution. That is what we need. And that is what they were trying to state. So we cannot be thinking all the time that if Africans have to make the jump, they need to check whether everything is okay. No, we can do like Guinea. They decided to get away from the colonial master. And what did they do? They had to bring up their economy and work for it. There's a time for hardship. You have to learn to go through hardship. And from there, you'll be the strongest. But for me, it is clear that we have to make the step. Yeah. If we don't make the step, we will never make it. If Africans have to always stay in their mind and say, if I do it, what will happen? We'll go nowhere. It's just like you have your youth in their house. What are they doing? They would like to do something. They'll come and say, Daddy, is my project good? You say no. They'll get back home. They will sit in the house and look at you. Is that the way you want us to be reacting? No. What he was trying to say, from what I got from Lena, was that we have the capacity. And what is happening today, what I heard long ago was that the day there will be peace in DRC, there will be peace in Africa. Africa will make a great step. Why is it that a place like DRC, which is the richest of the world, is still having wars every day and problems all the time? It's because those places are where we have all the richness that we need to use to make our continent better, and they keep on making us to be concentrated and distracted on the realities that we can go towards and make our continent to be one of the best. So for me, the first step is to have our currency, and the next step will be accept what is going to come. You talked about aid, you talked about aid. All those steps, there is something you have to sacrifice. If we have to sacrifice our, you said about drinking, let's forget about drinking and concentrate. We have people who can invent. Let's look at our inventors. That's the best thing we can do now. We cannot be afraid of jumping. If you don't make the big jump, you'll never have anything good.
All right. I agree with you. You have to jump. Actually, we are saying the same thing in different words. We have to jump.
Okay, let me get your last comments from Yaoundé, Mr. Fabrice, Lena. You'll be listening to the different callers' opinion and as well those here in the studio in Douala. Let's have your last say before we move to the second topic for the day.
Wanted to first of all react to what a doctor said, because he made mention of me talking about Africa having resources, and like he thought I'm talking about demography. It's not in terms of demography. Africa actually have the capacity of being the blockbuster of the world. There's no continent that have the manpower that Africa has. I mean the manpower that Africa has. In the period of slavery and slave trade, the Red Indians were rejected in the South American plantations. They said it is the black skin that could be the stamina to withstand the hot sun of the equatorial zones of the world, where the ultraviolet rays of the sun is touching the black pigment and it is not sick. That is the capacity I'm talking about. I'm talking about the capacity of working under the sun for a very long time and then containing headache, and then you just go back home, you drink a cup of stream water, not the fabricated mineral waters, the stream water from a village bush, and then you get fine. The next day you go to work and do farm. I think as a youth, before I went to the university, I had cultivated hectares of cassava where we walk 3 to 4 kilometers, we carry it on our heads, and then we go grind it. We have the different byproducts. If everyone is engaged into doing these things, it becomes according to each one's ability, and at the end, the result of everyone will deliver a best community, a best country. The problem here, doctor, is the structure of the government. Because when we look at the structure of the government, it does not permit people to even show their capacity. Is the government of Cameroon interested to know how many youths are capable of producing knowledge, an idea, a concrete idea, and sponsoring it? On the contrary, when you come out with a wonderful idea and the little means that you have, I mean money, you produce documents, take it to offices where they will have to send you to pass through bottleneck administrative procedures, whereas your stomach and your head are not in harmony. And then at the end you give up because you've tried to go close to the people who have the power in order to show what you can do, but they don't permit you. What do you do? What do you do? That is the capacity I'm talking about. Africans have the capacity, but they have leaders that have choose not to work with them. They have rather choose to work with foreigners who are using them to subdue their own people into torture, exploitation, and suffering. And that is why we are finding ourselves in the misery that we are today. That is my point, Doctor. When you go to northwest and west region of Cameroon, it is ferruginous soil area. It is the red soils. It is practically not very fertile compared to the center and the littoral regions. But look at how the mothers and the people of this area till the soil. Because in that zone in Cameroon, they actually till the soil, turn it, and then you weed about 3 times before you harvest the crops. Unlike people here in the center, that sometimes they go to the farm, they just dig the soil, put the maize, allow it, and just come and harvest. People are willing, but the conditions are not permitting them to show what they got. And that is what we are fighting against. I think as an educationist, doctor, you need to start by showing the example. You need to do revolution of knowledge in your school. The skills that children are trained with should not end at the level of the diplomas that they obtain, but you should empower them to be the mentor of their job creation with the little you got. It starts from there, and you become a Pan-African, and we book your name. Yes. So that is what I'm trying to say. And the issue of African currency is actually a very interesting issue. And I think that if we put this on discussion platforms of youth movements, of Pan-African debate, like one of my comrades from Kenya, we are working on a global Pan-African liberation program, and I think it is a very wonderful initiative. And we really think that this African Union and African currency, it's going to be possible. And even if we don't achieve it in the next century, our children are going to achieve the United States of Africa.
Mr. Fabrice, let me just add to this before you comment, Doctor. Now, Salome Nga on our Facebook page says that Africa is ready. The system in place must encourage entrepreneurship. This is coming from Salome Nga. She says that Africa is ready.
Yes.
The system in place must encourage entrepreneurship.
Correct. So when Fabrice is talking and Tessa is talking here, we are actually saying the same thing, but we are viewing the things from 2 different prisms. Fabrice, you see, when you're talking about the capacity, you are right. You're right. I'm talking about capacity too, I'm right. But I'm looking more at technological capacity while you are looking at the will, the passion, the desire to do, the physical strength to go with that farm 3 times. But I'm thinking of how do we train our children to use machines to do what we used to labor and do so as to improve production several times. So we are actually thinking the same. While you are saying, yes, we have the capacity for physical strength, the energy and so on. But in this new age, yes, you have to have the passion. Yes, you have to be strong, but you don't depend on physical strength to make things happen. You depend on understanding and the use of technology, and it's that technology part that I was looking at, and then leadership, entrepreneurship, all those soft skills.
All right.
I would like to add something. I would like to ask you a question. Do you see the diaspora as a possible means to work on that aspect?
Correct. That's a beautiful question. You see, if you look at what is happening in our countries, we usually ask French people to come, French technicians, French people, Chinese, South Koreans, and so on. They come and we pay them huge monies. But our own children are out there, And a good example, you've seen this lady, the Riteni project. I'm sure you've heard about the Riteni project. This German, she's a Cameroonian, a German, and they've been coming. The name is just flipping out of my mind. They've been coming to Cameroon. I think this is about their 5th time now, where they try to see how they can create that bridge where all of these, our sons and daughters from the diaspora, can get a foothold back at home and cause that transfer of technology. That is the way we should go, because we have so many. I think there are about 5,000 engineers, Cameroonian engineers in Germany or something like that.
That's the answer.
Yeah, that is it.
Saying.
Yes. So we need to correct our management, correct those financial things, and open the doors so that our people can come in. For instance, if I were in a position of strength, what would I do? I would just, I would say, all of you out there, buy the machines that you need, buy whatever you need, just put them in the ship, come. You are not paying any custom duty, you are paying nothing, just come. We give you land, we do whatever you want for you. They create those companies and create jobs and teach our children for the next 10 years. You don't pay any damn franc to any person, but just make sure that you take on 500 kids, 1,000 kids in your unit and train them. And we give ourselves a time limit. In 10 years we beat China.
But that's what we are trying to say, that we have the skills, but now we need to reorganize the whole system. We have our ECOA, if they say, and the next thing is that we develop the links with our diaspora.
I think you are right. We need to bring all these things together.
We should not be afraid. We can make the step. It's already time for it.
You are right.
Yeah, of course, it's a very broad topic, and we're very much going to be looking at it keenly and following the developments on how the ECO replacing the CFA is going to look like in the 8 West African countries. We shall be putting an eye on that keenly. But then let's talk a little now about the COVID-19, the coronavirus, which has touched about 55 countries in the African continent. Just recently, there was heated debate and several calls for the WHO to recognize what Madagascar has been doing so far with its COVID organic in fight against the coronavirus. And on Wednesday, the head of the WHO, Tedros Ghebreyesus, was in contact with the Madagascar president, Lena. He congratulated Madagascar on the work they are doing in the fight against the coronavirus and said they are going to be signing an undisclosed clause with Madagascar. Now, Doctor, we look at the appreciation which is coming after Madagascar slams the WHO, calling other African countries to, leave the WHO because he thinks that they are not working in the interest of Africa. He had first of all said that this World Organization is not approving the COVID organic coming from Madagascar because it's an African make, it's coming from a poor African country. Now, World Organization has reacted recently. How do you welcome this reaction from the WHO?
Thank you very much. You give me an opportunity to try to walk around some of the concepts and the misunderstandings that are going on so that we really know what is going on. And I think COVID-19 is something, it has never been there before. It came and then created this pandemic. And the good thing about COVID-19 is that it has shaken all foundations.
Yeah.
It has shaken all foundations, and it has, when a foundation is shaken, then some closets in which some things were hidden, those closets open, and then we get to see what was inside. Up until now, my belief was that a white man was a great person and you could be trusted and so on. That was, they were great people. Whatever they did was good and so on, except of course for the, some other things that we will not say here. But you would think that when a white man is telling you something, just believe it without arguing. But when it turns out that we begin to, in Africa, we are kind of like just spectators in the sense that we didn't know about COVID-19, and we know that God created coronaviruses and He created us. We are living our life and the coronaviruses are doing their own thing. But these white people, they go and take the coronavirus and try to modify it to kill Africans, to kill other people, and make money. What to do what with money? One doesn't understand. What are you doing with all that money? And when you hear the names that are mentioned in the media, they have so much money already. So they want more money. Do they want to go to the moon? Even if they wanted to go to the moon, now they still could go and leave people alone. So you begin to see there is greed, there is ego, there is a clash now of spirits, the spirit of good and the spirit of evil. And so with all these things now, there is a lot of doubts and you no longer that element of trust is gone. Because I was looking at you, you were bringing vaccines to me, and I thought you were helping me, but you were injecting me HIV disease, you were injecting syphilis disease, you were doing things, you were giving me, you were giving me genetically modified food and saying it's going to help my hunger, but it looked like you had laced it with something. So we begin to step back now and watch this thing and say, these fellows are there's something. And if the intention was for them to make money, and then somebody is coming from Africa with something, they will of course first tell you that it's not good, because you are now blocking their initial plan. But that said, let us also understand that, you know, COVID-19 happens to be what it is. When it just started, you see there were a lot of apostles over there. Okay, we pray for you, we'll go away, do this, and then many other native doctors coming up with all sorts of concoctions, and that causes a lot of confusion. So it's not because somebody just said that I have this thing that cures that WHO will say it is okay. It has to go through some kind of a process. But I would imagine that by the time a president really steps up and says, this is what we've been doing so far, and we think you can look at this, then WHO says, okay, let us look at it. Given, of course, that I think the guy who heads WHO is from Ethiopia or somewhere, he's an African too. So and then he's been nailed badly by President Donald Trump. So, you know, this give and take. So we get to a point where they say, okay, probably there's something in it. Let us really, instead of just rejecting it, let us look at it and see whether there's something in it that we can take away with us. And then for that to happen, they sign the non-disclosure agreement. What does that mean? So the government of Madagascar gives its product to WHO and says, take. But you and I, we have to agree that whatever components you discover in them, don't tell others about it. And then we have the what are those rights again? Those when you discover something, you have a patent. You have patent rights over it and so on. Otherwise, you know, if you didn't do that, these big pharmaceutical companies, they are very smart. When they go and get, because all of those pharmaceutical companies, don't be surprised that I've already bought samples of that product. Even the one Monseigneur Claire has here, they have bought all those things. They will take to their laboratories and try to identify the components. They can do it faster in 24 hours. They know everything that is inside there with the percentages and so on. Then all they need to do is to make sure that it is working. So if they do these things, they can go back in their laboratories and just make them and call them other different names and say, oh, we came out with something. So that is the kind of that's the agreement that they were signing. So it's a good thing. Madagascar, I was reading about it, Madagascar had the problem that their numbers of coronavirus cases are so small that doing their own clinical tests is a little bit tricky. So they are giving us results based on the few cases they have handled. But now WHO has the opportunity to test this on a wider group of people and tell us whether in reality this thing is working or not.
All right, thank you very much, Doctor. Now, Tessa, when you look at WHO, because it's headed by an African, this body is the Health Agency of the United Nations. Can it be trusted so far with everything they've been doing? Let's center around coronavirus and how it's been managed at the level of Africa as well. We'll look at the COVID-19 for Madagascar and the several calls that has been made by media organs and personalities for the WHO to recognize the work of Madagascar. Just recently, Wednesday, we had a meeting with Madagascar president. What do you think?
What I would say is that Doctor did a very beautiful description, which was so romantic between the world and WHO, how they need to have a process to know. I'm sorry, there was no call made onto Africa to discover the cure. There was no possibility that Africa could be counted amongst the people to discover. If you really watch out, they were surprised. It is a big change, something they didn't await. When you're telling me that it's an African who is heading that organization, I can say that I believe that is more of the white people than the African, because his attitude could have been even very close to the Africans that we were. And I think that the situation we are living right now in Africa is very complicated because of the process they had to install, because we are having people getting infected. But now the curing is going to be complicated, knowing that everybody has a different reaction to the virus. So automatically today, we are finding countries where we have cases of more than 2,000 people infected. How are we going to work it out? If it is today that they take time, and I think that is not because they really want to take it. They take it because they have been called so many times, and there are words from the president of Madagascar, which was really painful for them because it showed how low they were looking at Africa. And what is really funny is that you're saying again that it's an African who is heading the organization. So I would simply say that we had a very slow process. If it had been discovered like in France, we had that doctor who was saying he had chloroquine. What happened? The next day, the president was at his place to understand what is happening. Why is it that when it was Africa, with the whole president standing forward, explaining everything, it is nearly 2 days ago that there was this reaction? And when you're talking about the contract that they had to sign, I really believe that what is going to happen is not actually what was written out, because they cannot have such a solution and just watch it being used by another person. There will be a change at a time. Maybe they will say that they ameliorated the product and they will sell it with another shape. What is sure is that Madagascar is not going to come up to claim for that know-how. The issue now is that everybody should get cured. But for me, the organization took a lot of time because it was Africa. They were surprised, it's true. But if an African was heading that organization, it would have been better that he came closer to the people and tried to understand. If we are talking today that everything that comes from Africa should be looked upon with very low attitude, I think that many more are going to die. And what is the process that they are going to now use when they have the COVID drugs? What are they going to do with it? Are they going to go and put it in vaccines? Are they going to share it out up to everybody in the world? Because today, we would like to understand what is going to happen. He appreciated. What is the aim if he appreciated? We want to understand what is actually going to go on. For me, that's my interest. It's not because we knew long ago that they don't have a solution and they cannot come like a big boasting and trying to show to us that they have brought something. No, accepting it is not what we want now. It's to know how it is going to be used.
All right. Now, let me get to you, Mr. Fabrice Lena. What do you think after World Organization got in contact with Madagascar's president at last to congratulate him on the COVID organic? Now, this is coming after several calls have been made, and the president of Madagascar threatened to call African countries to leave the World Organization because it is not working for the interests of Africans. Now, this Wednesday's meeting, what do you make out of that?
To me, I will first of all appreciate and congratulate the Madagascar president, Andry Rajoelina. You see, that is the new perspective of African leadership that we want. This guy is young, dynamic, sets the example, and takes the challenge. That's one. I would also like to appreciate the Malagasy Institute of Applied Research, MIA, which came up with a COVID organics that proved to be curing this COVID-19 pandemic. The World Health Organization should not come around to pretend to us that they commend or congratulate Madagascar or Andry Rajoelina. Please, they should stop this hypocrisy. In the early stage of this pandemic, the World Health Organization connived with China to hide the information about this virus, which started approximately in November 2019, to only tweet and carry out reactions on the 5th of January 2020. After warnings from Taiwan, after warnings from Hong Kong, after warnings from Thailand that the COVID-19 could be a danger to the world Health Organization did not react. When you look at Mr. Tedros at the norm, you discover that China contributing only 12% to the World Health Organization and USA contributing 22% are at loggerheads because China influences the World Health Organization and chooses the leadership that fits their influence and domination in the world market. They are not happy, they are surprised, they are shocked that in a world crisis, Africa is coming to be the breadwinner of the family. Africa is coming to be the solution of the world. They are very, very shocked. But what makes me happy, what gladdens my heart most, is the reaction of the president of Madagascar. When you look at the guy's dynamism, he took the challenge. He first of all drank the COVID organics, said, I, the president, drinks it, and I assure you, it cures, it doesn't kill. And the research institute is responsible for everything that comes after it. A good World Health Organization should have set up a commission of inquiry, investigation of world professional doctors to go into Madagascar, do investigations, make hypotheses, and establish something that could make us to understand whether these organics were fit for consumption or not. And
thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Fabrice, Lena, thank you very much. I know you had so much in stock to deliver, but definitely we're coming to the end of the program. It's time for us to leave the studio for other programs to continue. Doctor, I want to thank you very much for coming. We hope to have you again. It's a situation that is developing, and we're still going to come back here to talk more on that, I think.
But before we leave the studio, I just want to let everybody understand that COVID-19 is a new disease, and then even when it started, a lot of people, doctors, scientists thought this is the way it manifests itself. This is the way it kills. I'm talking about the pathophysiology, and a lot of people believe that we needed respirators to stay alive. And President Trump even ordered that so many respirators should be made for America. But it turns out that the issue is not really respirators, it's intravascular coagulation, which means the respirators are not as useful as we thought. Okay. So the disease is changing, and we ought to be following these trends. It's very important.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Tessa. Thanks very much for coming. We hope to have you again next time. And back in Yaoundé, we thank you very much, Mr. Fabrice Lena, who was joining us from Yaoundé. We thank you very much for being there. And those of you who are watching, those of you who did commented online and you're watching us on Facebook, we want to thank you very much for being there. Have a wonderful time. More programs are coming up right ahead. The rebroadcast will be yours on Monday at 2:30 p.m. On today, stay blessed.
Nous arrivons désormais chez vous à travers de nouvelles coordonnées et un signal haute définition pour une qualité de réception inédite. Et pour nous recevoir, pas besoin de bouger votre parabole. Faites juste entrer la fréquence 12541 et le symbole rate 12500 sur le satellite Amos pour recevoir un signal merveilleux de la télévision panafricaine, même en temps de pluie.
Afrique Média, le monde, c'est nous.